The moment his brother's new wife screamed when she saw him sitting behind the mahogany desk in the executive office, Charleston realized his family had no idea who he really was. The family group chat message from yesterday still burned in his mind. "Don't come to the Sunday get-together. My new wife says you'll make the whole party stink." His parents had immediately liked the message. Charleston had simply replied, "Understood." But now, watching his brother Derek and sister-in-law Courtney stand frozen in his office doorway, everything was about to change forever. I stared at Derek and Courtney through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, 23 floors above downtown Chicago's bustling streets. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd come here seeking business from someone they considered the family failure. But let me back up and explain how we got to this moment. Growing up in Springfield, Illinois, Derek had always been the golden child. 2 years younger than me, he'd sailed through high school with perfect grades, quarterback of the football team, prom king. I was the opposite. Average student, kept to myself, spent most of my time reading business books instead of socializing. When Derek graduated as valedictorian and got a full scholarship to Northwestern University, our parents couldn't stop bragging to neighbors. When I dropped out of college junior year to pursue what they called pipe dreams, the disappointment in their eyes cut deeper than any words. Derek's path seemed predetermined for success. He graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, landed a marketing job at a respected firm in Springfield, and started dating Courtney Walsh, whose father owned 3 car dealerships across central Illinois. Courtney was everything our parents hoped for in a daughter-in-law, polished, well-connected from what they considered good stock. She had perfectly straightened blonde hair, always wore designer clothes, and posted constantly on social media about their picture-perfect relationship. Meanwhile, I'd moved to Chicago, after dropping out, determined to prove I could build something meaningful. But my family wrote me off as the black sheep who'd thrown away his opportunities. The weekly Sunday gatherings at our parents' house became a showcase for Derek's achievements while I gradually stopped attending. For the past 2 years, I'd made excuses to avoid those dinners, claiming work obligations or other commitments. What my family didn't know was that I'd been secretly supporting them financially for months. 18 months ago, I discovered our parents were struggling with their mortgage payments. Dad's construction company had hit hard times during the economic downturn, and Mom's part-time job at the library barely covered groceries. They were too proud to ask for help, so I created an elaborate story about a distant relative leaving them an inheritance. I hired a professional actor to play a lawyer who delivered the fake windfall enough to cover their mortgage for 2 years. Derek's wedding last year had cost more than our parents could afford, but they insisted on giving their golden child the perfect celebration. I orchestrated another scheme, making them believe they'd won a church raffle that covered most of the wedding expenses. Derek and Courtney had their dream reception at the Springfield Country Club, complete with ice sculptures and a live band, never knowing their despised older brother had made it possible. The Sunday gathering tradition continued without me. Every week, Derek would show up with Courtney to display their latest achievements. New car promotion at work, vacation photos from expensive resorts. Courtney treated these dinners like personal photo shoots, constantly posing for Instagram stories about their blessed family time. She'd grown up wealthy and couldn't understand why anyone would struggle financially. What made yesterday's group chat message particularly cruel was the context. Courtney had complained to Derek that my presence at family gatherings embarrassed her in front of her wealthy friends. She'd apparently told him that having a college dropout brother reflected poorly on Derek's image, especially now that he was trying to build his own marketing company. Derek had internalized her status anxiety and decided my absence would improve their family's social standing. The group chat thread had been devastating. Derek's message, "Don't come to the Sunday get-together. My new wife says you'll make the whole party stink." Within minutes, both parents had liked the message. No questions, no defense of their older son, just immediate approval of my exclusion. I'd sat in my penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan reading those digital hearts next to Derek's cruel words, feeling more alone than ever. I'd simply replied, "Understood," and set my phone aside. There was no point in defending myself or explaining the irony. My family had no idea that the brother they considered a failure had built a multi-million-dollar consulting business. They didn't know I owned the downtown high-rise where Derek was about to discover a truth that would shatter his assumptions about success and family dynamics. The consulting business I'd started 3 years ago, Turner and Associates, had grown beyond my wildest dreams. What began as freelance work helping small businesses optimize their operations had evolved into a firm handling Fortune 500 clients. I'd identified a gap in the market where traditional consulting firms were too expensive for mid-sized companies, but too impersonal for smaller businesses. My approach combined high-level strategic thinking with hands-on implementation, filling that sweet spot perfectly. But watching my family celebrate Derek's modest marketing job while dismissing my entrepreneurial efforts had become unbearable. The cognitive dissonance of secretly funding their lifestyle while being treated as the family embarrassment had pushed me to avoid those Sunday gatherings entirely. I'd built everything they claimed to value, yet remained invisible to them because I'd chosen an unconventional path. Derek and Courtney stood frozen in my office doorway, their business appointment taking an unexpected turn. They'd spent weeks researching Turner and Associates, preparing their pitch to win a consulting contract that could save Derek's struggling marketing company. What they hadn't researched was the identity of the company's founder. My assistant Patricia had simply announced, "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes here for the 3 o'clock appointment," when Derek's company name appeared on my calendar. I'd had no idea they were coming until that moment. The recognition hit me like a physical blow, followed immediately by the delicious irony of the situation. Let me explain how Derek ended up in my office. 6 months ago, he'd left his comfortable marketing job to start his own agency, convinced he could replicate the success he'd observed in others. Courtney had encouraged the move, dreaming of becoming the wife of a successful entrepreneur rather than just another corporate employee. She'd pushed Derek to take bigger risks, pursue higher-profile clients, and project an image of success they hadn't yet earned. Derek's company, Hayes Marketing Solutions, had initially landed a few small local accounts through family connections. But as he'd tried to expand beyond Springfield's limited market, he'd discovered that running a business required skills he'd never developed as an employee. Cash flow problems emerged. Client expectations exceeded his capabilities. The monthly overhead for office space equipment and staff began consuming revenue faster than he could generate it. 3 weeks ago, Derek had finally admitted to himself that his company was failing. Rather than scaling back or seeking help from experienced entrepreneurs, he'd doubled down on a desperate strategy. He'd researched successful consulting firms in Chicago, hoping to partner with one that could provide the expertise his clients demanded. Turner and Associates had appeared at the top of every search with glowing reviews and an impressive client roster. The irony deepened when I realized Derek had spent countless hours studying my business model without recognizing my name associated with it. The company website featured testimonials and case studies, but I deliberately kept my personal profile minimal to maintain privacy. Most clients worked with my senior consultants rather than directly with me, allowing the business to scale without my constant involvement. Turner and Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor of a prestigious downtown Chicago tower. When Derek and Courtney stepped off the elevator, they'd walked past awards and recognition plaques covering the walls. Industry publications had featured our innovative approaches to business optimization. The Chicago Business Journal had named us one of the fastest-growing consulting firms 3 years running. Client testimonials praised our ability to transform struggling companies into profitable enterprises. My corner office reflected the success I'd built through 70-hour work weeks and relentless focus on client results. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline. A conference table accommodated 12 people for strategic planning sessions. Bookshelves held business journals, industry reports, and photographs with clients ranging from local nonprofits to international corporations. The moment Courtney screamed, recognizing me from family photographs, the carefully constructed narrative Derek had built about his successful older brother crumbled. Derek's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and dawning comprehension. The brother he'd mocked for dropping out of college owned exactly the type of business he'd dreamed of building. I maintained professional composure despite the emotional tsunami crashing through my mind. "Please have a seat," I said, gesturing toward the leather chairs facing my desk. "I understand you're interested in discussing a potential partnership." Derek's mouth opened and closed without sound. Courtney grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. The confident couple who'd entered my office had transformed into uncertain visitors, confronting their own assumptions about success and failure. Patricia had prepared a comprehensive briefing about Hayes Marketing Solutions, including financial projections, client testimonials, and Derek's business plan. I'd reviewed the materials that morning, not knowing I was evaluating my brother's work. The analysis revealed fundamental problems that extended far beyond what Derek realized. "Your company has interesting potential." I continued opening Derek's file with deliberate calm. "Though I noticed some challenges in your current approach that we might address together." The power dynamic had shifted completely. Derek, who'd grown up believing himself superior to his older brother, now sat across from someone whose success dwarfed his own achievements. Courtney, who'd spent years posting social media content about her husband's promising career, realized she'd been connected to genuine success all along through the family member she'd encouraged Derek to exclude. As they settled into chairs, I couldn't help but reflect on the cruel irony. Derek had come seeking help from the brother he'd just banned from family gatherings. The family failure he'd publicly humiliated was now his only hope for business survival. The college dropout who supposedly embarrassed their family had built exactly the kind of enterprise Derek aspired to own. But beyond the irony lay deeper pain. These were my parents' children, the family I'd supported anonymously while being treated as an outsider. The brother I'd grown up with, despite our differences, was sitting in my office because his dreams were crumbling. The sister-in-law who'd dismissed me was confronting the reality that her social status had been subsidized by my hidden generosity. I set Derek's business plan aside and looked directly at both of them. "Before we discuss your company's needs," I said quietly, "perhaps we should address the elephant in the room." Derek cleared his throat, attempting to regain his composure. "Charleston, I had no idea you—" He paused, struggling to find words that could bridge the gap between his assumptions and reality. "This is incredible. You own all of this." His gesture encompassed the office, but I knew he meant something larger. The success, the recognition, the business empire I'd built while he'd considered me a failure. Courtney shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her earlier scream echoing in the silence between us. "I mean, this is amazing," Derek continued, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "My big brother, the successful entrepreneur. Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were doing so well." Courtney jumped in, her social instincts kicking in despite her obvious discomfort. "This is such a wonderful surprise. Derek's always talked about how much he admires successful business owners. Having family connections in consulting could be so beneficial for everyone involved." I let them fumble through their awkward recovery attempts, watching the gears turn as they tried to reframe our relationship. The brother they'd just excluded from family gatherings was now someone they needed. The embarrassment they'd wanted to hide had become their potential salvation. Let's focus on your business needs, I said, pulling Derek's proposal toward me. You mentioned interest in strategic consulting services. Walk me through your current situation. Derek launched into his prepared pitch describing Hayes Marketing Solutions with the polished enthusiasm he'd perfected for client meetings. He talked about their innovative approaches, their growing client base, their ambitious expansion plans. Courtney nodded supportively, occasionally adding details about Derek's vision and dedication. For 20 minutes, I let them present their carefully crafted narrative. Derek's PowerPoint slides portrayed a thriving company positioned for explosive growth. Client testimonials praised their creativity and responsiveness. Revenue projections showed dramatic increases over the next 3 years. They painted a picture of a business that needed strategic guidance to maximize its potential. I took notes, asked clarifying questions, and maintained the professional demeanor clients expected from Turner and Associates. But I'd already analyzed their real financial situation from the materials Patricia had compiled. The gap between Derek's presentation and reality was staggering. Courtney interrupted Derek's pitch about their competitive advantages. Of course, having family connections makes this even more exciting, she said with practiced charm. I'm sure we can work out something beneficial for everyone. Family should support family, right? Her assumption that our relationship would guarantee special treatment revealed everything I needed to know about her character. She expected me to overlook business fundamentals because of blood relations, despite having just supported my exclusion from those same family connections. I set my pen down and reached for my phone. Before we continue, I said quietly, I think you should hear something. Derek's confident expression faltered. Courtney's smile became strained. I opened the voice recording app I'd used to document yesterday's family group chat conversation, a practice I'd started after months of similar incidents. This recording was made yesterday evening, I explained, pressing play. I think it provides important context for our discussion. Derek's voice filled the office, clear and unmistakable. Mom, Dad, I've been thinking about this Sunday dinner situation. Courtney's right that Charleston's presence creates problems. My father's voice responded, What kind of problems? Well, her friends from the country club sometimes ask about family. Having a college dropout brother doesn't exactly fit the image we're trying to project. Derek's trying to build a business, and perception matters in marketing. My mother's laughter came through the speakers. Charleston probably lives in some dumpy apartment working odd jobs. It would be embarrassing if Courtney's friends found out. Derek's voice continued. Courtney thinks Charleston might even steal something if he comes to the house. He's probably desperate for money, living paycheck to paycheck like he always has. Courtney's recorded voice added, I just think the family would look more respectable without him there. Derek's building something important, and image matters in business. My father's agreement followed. You're probably right. Charleston never amounted to much anyway. Better to focus on supporting Derek's success. The recording captured 30 minutes of conversation, each comment more devastating than the last. My family had spent the evening dismantling my character, laughing about my supposed failures, and agreeing that my absence would improve their social standing. Derek had crafted his cruel group chat message after this extended discussion with full family support. Derek's face had drained of color as his own words played back. Courtney sat motionless, realizing her voice was preserved, saying things she'd never expected anyone else to hear. The confident couple who'd entered my office now confronted the reality of their recorded cruelty. I stopped the recording and set my phone aside. This provides helpful context for understanding our family dynamics, I said with professional calm. Now, shall we return to discussing your business needs? The power dynamic had shifted beyond recovery. Derek's desperate sales pitch now rang hollow against the backdrop of his recorded mockery. Courtney's attempts at family bonding crumbled under the weight of her documented disdain. They'd come seeking help from someone they'd just finished humiliating. and the recording made their hypocrisy undeniable. Derek struggled to find words. Charleston, we were just… that conversation was taken out of context. Was it? I asked quietly. Which part was out of context? The part where you called me the family embarrassment, or the part where you all laughed about my supposed poverty? Courtney's composed facade finally cracked. We didn't know, she whispered. We had no idea you were successful. That's precisely the problem, I replied. You made assumptions about my life without ever asking. You excluded me from family gatherings based on imaginary embarrassment. You supported Derek's cruel message without considering how it might affect me. The recording had accomplished what no argument could achieve. Derek and Courtney couldn't deny their words or rationalize their behavior. They'd revealed their true attitudes toward family loyalty, and now faced the consequences of that revelation while desperately needing my help. I opened Derek's business file again, returning to the professional discussion as if the recording had been a minor interruption. But everything had changed. They knew I'd heard their unfiltered opinions. I knew their visit was motivated by desperation rather than family connection. The facade of successful entrepreneurs seeking strategic partnership had collapsed, revealing the reality of a failing business and a humiliated brother's last resort. Now, I said, reviewing their financial projections, let's discuss the actual state of your company. I spread Derek's financial documents across my conference table, each page revealing the gap between his presentation and reality. The polished PowerPoint slides had painted a picture of growth and opportunity, but the underlying numbers told a different story entirely. Your revenue projections show a 300% increase over 2 years. I began pointing to specific figures. But your current client retention rate is only 62%. Industry standard for sustainable marketing firms is above 85%. Derek shifted uncomfortably as I highlighted the mathematical impossibilities in his business plan. Courtney's confident demeanor evaporated as the scope of their problems became clear. More concerning, I continued, your pricing structure undercuts industry standards by 40%. You're essentially paying clients to work with you once you factor in actual costs. The harsh reality was that Derek's desperation for quick revenue had led him to accept contracts that guaranteed losses. He'd promised results he couldn't deliver at prices that ensured failure. The business model was fundamentally broken from conception. But the most significant issue, I said, pulling out my laptop, is market positioning. I opened a presentation showing Turner & Associates' recent client acquisitions. Derek's face went white as he recognized company names from his target list. 5 businesses he'd planned to pursue over the next 6 months were already working with my firm. Springfield Manufacturing, Central Illinois Healthcare, Prairie State, Credit Union, Heartland Foods, and Meridian Insurance. I read from the list. All signed contracts with Turner & Associates within the past 30 days. Derek stared at the screen in disbelief. Those were our primary prospects for Q4. We've been researching them for months. I'm sure you have, I replied. Unfortunately, your research identified companies that were already seeking consulting services. They'd contacted multiple firms, including mine, before you even knew they were potential clients. The cruel irony became clear. Derek had unknowingly been competing against my company for every significant opportunity. His brother's firm was systematically capturing the exact clients he'd hoped would save his business. Courtney finally spoke, her voice barely audible. How many of Derek's potential clients are already working with you? I pulled up our client database filtering for companies in Derek's geographic and industry targets. Approximately 73% of the businesses on your prospecting list are either current clients or have engaged us within the past 12 months. Derek buried his face in his hands. His entire business strategy had been built around pursuing companies that were already receiving the services he offered to provide. The market research that had taken months to complete was worthless because he'd been operating in my company's shadow without knowing it. "Oh, there's more," I said, gently, recognizing that Derek was approaching emotional collapse. "Your business practices have created reputation problems within the industry." I showed them emails I'd received from 3 different business owners warning about Derek's company. One described promises of guaranteed results that weren't delivered. Another complained about aggressive sales tactics and unrealistic timelines. A third mentioned concerns about financial stability after Derek had requested payment upfront for services his company couldn't provide. "The Springfield business community is smaller than you realize," I explained. "Word travels quickly when companies overpromise and underdeliver. Several potential clients have specifically asked me about Hayes Marketing Solutions, wondering if they should be concerned." Courtney's carefully constructed world was crumbling. Her social media posts about Derek's entrepreneurial success now seemed naive and embarrassing. The country club friends she'd worried about impressing would soon discover that her husband's business was not just struggling, but actively damaging his professional reputation. "What does this mean for Derek's company?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I closed the laptop and looked directly at both of them. "Honestly, Hayes Marketing Solutions is 6 weeks from bankruptcy. Your burn rate exceeds revenue by approximately $12,000 per month. You've overpromised to existing clients and have no realistic path to profitability." Derek looked up from his hands, his eyes red with unshed tears. "Is there any way to save it?" "That depends," I said, "on whether you're willing to acknowledge reality and accept help." I outlined the steps required to salvage Derek's business: immediate restructuring of client contracts, honest communication about capabilities, dramatic reduction in overhead, and implementation of sustainable pricing. Most importantly, Derek would need to rebuild his professional reputation through ethical practices and realistic promises. "I can provide the consulting expertise needed to turn your company around," I continued. "But it would require fundamental changes to how you operate. No more guaranteeing impossible results. No more undercutting competitors. No more promising timelines you can't meet." Derek nodded eagerly, grasping at the lifeline I'd offered. But I wasn't finished. "There's one more thing you should know," I said, pulling out another file. "I'm aware of your personal financial situation as well." The color drained from Derek's face as I revealed what I'd discovered. He'd borrowed $30,000 from our parents to fund his business operations, telling them it was a temporary loan to cover expansion costs. Our parents had liquidated part of their retirement savings to provide the money, believing Derek's assurances about rapid repayment. "They don't know your business is failing," I said quietly. "They're expecting repayment within 6 months, money they can't afford to lose." Courtney gasped. "Derek didn't tell me about borrowing from his parents." "Because he knew you'd object to the risk," I replied. "But more importantly, our parents are considering selling the family house to generate additional cash for what they believe is Derek's expansion fund." The full scope of the disaster became clear. Derek's failing business wasn't just threatening his own future, but potentially destroying our parents' retirement security. The brother, who'd been celebrated as the family's hope for financial success, was actually jeopardizing everyone's stability. "I can save your company," I told Derek. "I can restructure your debts, rebuild your reputation, and establish sustainable operations. But I need something from you first." Derek looked up desperately. "Anything. What do you need?" I reached for my phone, opening the recording app again. "This meeting has been recorded for legal purposes, standard practice for Turner and Associates. The recording captures your misrepresentations about business performance and client relationships." Derek's confusion was evident until I explained the implications. "I have a legal obligation to report fraudulent business practices to industry oversight committees. Your recorded statements today constitute grounds for ethics violations that could permanently bar you from marketing consulting work. The final twist landed with devastating impact. Derek had unknowingly created evidence of his own professional misconduct during our meeting. His desperate attempts to exaggerate his company's success could destroy his career entirely if reported to regulatory authorities. "I'm offering you a choice," I said, setting the recording device between us. "Accept my help, change your business practices, and rebuild your reputation honestly. Or continue operating as you've been knowing that this recording will be submitted to the Better Business Bureau and the Illinois Marketing Association Ethics Committee." Derek stared at the phone, realizing his brother now held complete power over his professional future. The family member he'd just excluded from gatherings controlled not only his business survival, but his entire career prospects. Courtney reached for Derek's hand, both of them finally understanding that their visit to my office had become a moment of reckoning, far beyond anything they'd anticipated. Derek's hands trembled as he reached for the water glass Patricia had thoughtfully provided. Courtney sat motionless, her usual social confidence completely shattered. The business discussion had revealed problems far beyond what either of them had imagined, but I wasn't finished. There was a deeper family crisis they didn't know about yet. "Before you decide how to respond to my offer," I said, "there's something else you need to understand about our family's financial situation." I pulled out my phone and played a recording I'd made 3 weeks earlier. Our parents' voices filled the office, captured during a conversation I'd overheard while visiting to drop off groceries anonymously. "Harold, we can't keep this from the boys much longer," my mother's voice said through the speakers. "The second mortgage is killing us." My father's tired voice responded, "Derek's business is doing so well, Martha. He'll pay back that loan soon, and then we can get back on track. But what if something goes wrong? We've already used most of our retirement savings. If we have to sell the house, we won't sell the house. Derek's not like Charleston. Derek knows how to handle money." Derek's face went ashen as he heard our parents discussing financial struggles he'd never suspected. But the recording continued, revealing the full scope of their desperation. "Maybe we should ask Derek for help with the monthly payments," Mom suggested. "Just until his loan gets paid back." "Absolutely not," Dad replied firmly. "We're not becoming a burden to our successful son. Derek's building something important. We'll figure this out ourselves." The recording captured 20 minutes of conversation about selling family heirlooms, taking additional part-time work, and considering downsizing to a smaller home. Our parents were drowning financially while maintaining a facade of stability to protect Derek's image. I stopped the recording and looked directly at Derek. "They recorded this conversation 3 weeks ago, the same day you texted me to stay away from family gatherings." Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "I had no idea they were struggling." "Because they're protecting you from the truth," I replied. "They've convinced themselves that your business success justifies their sacrifices. They're planning to remortgage the house to provide additional funding for what they believe is your expansion." Courtney finally found her voice. "Derek, you told me your parents were financially stable." "I thought they were," Derek protested. "They never said anything about money problems." I opened my laptop and showed them bank records I'd obtained through the financial management service I'd secretly arranged for our parents. The numbers were worse than the recording suggested. Dad's construction business had been operating at a loss for 8 months. Mom's part-time library position provided barely enough for groceries. The $30,000 they'd loaned Derek had come from liquidating their entire retirement account. "They have approximately 6 weeks of mortgage payments left in their checking account," I explained. "After that, they'll need to choose between keeping the house and eating." Derek stared at the financial records in horror. "Why didn't they tell me?" "Because you've spent years positioning yourself as the successful son who has everything figured out. They're too proud to admit they need help from someone they consider financially secure." The irony was devastating. Derek's image as the family's financial success story had become a prison preventing our parents from seeking help, while they sacrificed everything to maintain that illusion. Meanwhile, the brother they'd dismissed as a failure had been secretly preventing their financial collapse. There's more you should know. I continued pulling out another file. The inheritance story they believe is fictional. I created it to funnel money to them without damaging their pride. I showed Derek documentation of the elaborate scheme I'd constructed: the fake lawyer, the fictional distant relative, the carefully crafted inheritance story that had provided 18 months of mortgage payments. Every detail had been designed to give our parents financial relief while preserving their dignity. You've been supporting them? Courtney asked in amazement. For over a year, I confirmed. Including funding Derek's wedding, though they don't know that either. The church raffle they think they won was another fictional cover story. Derek's wedding at the Springfield Country Club, the reception Courtney had posted about endlessly on social media, the honeymoon in Cancun they'd bragged about to friends. All of it had been subsidized by the brother they now excluded from family gatherings. I've also been covering Dad's business insurance premiums and Mom's prescription medications, I added. They think they're getting senior discounts, but I've been paying the difference through medical and business assistance programs I created. The scope of my secret financial support was staggering. For 18 months, I'd been the invisible foundation keeping our family stable, while being treated as the member who couldn't contribute anything valuable. Derek buried his face in his hands again. Charleston, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. That's the problem, I said. You made assumptions about my life without ever asking questions. You decided I was embarrassing without investigating what I'd actually accomplished. You supported excluding me from family gatherings while I was secretly funding those same gatherings. Courtney's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she confronted the reality that her lifestyle, her wedding, her social status had all been made possible by the brother-in-law she'd convinced Derek to reject. The house they're planning to sell to support your business, I continued, is the house I've been saving from foreclosure. The retirement money they loaned you was supposed to be supplemented by the fake inheritance I arranged. Your business problems aren't just threatening your future. They're destroying the financial safety net I spent months creating for our parents. Derek looked up with red eyes. Can you save them? Can you prevent them from losing everything? I replied. But not while maintaining the current family dynamic. I can't continue secretly supporting people who openly mock and exclude me. I can't keep funding a lifestyle for parents who enable their younger son to treat their older son like garbage. The conversation had reached its crucial turning point. Derek now understood that his family's financial stability, his business survival, and his professional reputation all depended on the brother he'd just publicly humiliated. The power dynamic wasn't just reversed, it was completely inverted. What do you want from us? Courtney asked quietly. I leaned back in my chair, considering how to answer. The question revealed everything about how they viewed relationships as transactional. Assuming I wanted something in return for my support. I want honesty, I said, finally. I want acknowledgement. I want to be treated like a family member rather than an embarrassment to be hidden. Derek nodded frantically. Of course, absolutely. We can fix this. Can you? I asked. Because fixing this means admitting to our parents that your business is failing. It means acknowledging that their embarrassing older son has been their financial lifeline. It means confronting the fact that your success story has been largely funded by someone you considered a failure. The weight of truth was crushing them both. Derek's entire identity as the successful brother would crumble when our parents learned the reality. Courtney's social media narrative about her entrepreneur husband would become a painful reminder of their shared delusions. But more than their personal discomfort, they were confronting the possibility that their pride had nearly destroyed the family member who'd been holding everyone together. I reached for the recording device on my desk, its red light still blinking. Derek and Courtney watched nervously as I picked it up, their futures hanging on whatever I said next. "This device has captured everything we've discussed today," I said calmly. Derek's misrepresentations about business performance, false claims about client relationships, and documented evidence of practices that violate industry ethics standards. Derek's face went pale. "Charleston, you can't seriously be thinking about using that against me. I have legal and ethical obligations as a licensed business consultant," I replied. "When I encounter fraudulent practices, I'm required to report them to the Illinois Marketing Association and the Better Business Bureau. Your recorded statements today provide clear evidence of violations." I set the device on the table between us and opened my laptop. "Let me show you what submission of this recording would mean for your career." The screen displayed the Illinois Marketing Association's ethics complaint form. Derek's name was already filled in as the subject of investigation. Supporting documentation included his misleading business claims, false revenue projections, and misrepresentation of client relationships. Professional sanctions would include suspension of business licenses, public listing on the industry fraud database, and permanent prohibition from consulting work in Illinois. I explained. "Your name would appear on background checks for any future employment in marketing or business consulting." Courtney gasped. "You'd destroy Derek's career over a family argument." "I'm not destroying anything," I corrected. "Derek's business practices have already created these problems. I'm simply deciding whether to document them officially or help him rebuild properly." I clicked to another screen showing Derek's current debt obligations, business credit cards maxed at $47,000 equipment loans, totaling $23,000 office lease commitments for 18 months, and the $30,000 borrowed from our parents. Total liabilities exceeded $100,000 against assets worth perhaps $15,000. Without intervention, Derek will file for bankruptcy within 2 months. I continued. The question is whether that bankruptcy includes criminal fraud charges based on misrepresentations to clients and lenders. Derek's breathing became shallow as the scope of his legal exposure became clear. He'd signed contracts promising results he couldn't deliver, taken payments for services his company couldn't provide, and made financial projections he'd known were false. The recording captured admissions that could support criminal charges beyond simple business failure. "But I'm offering an alternative," I said, closing the ethics complaint form. "Complete restructuring of your business under my supervision with transparent operations and honest client communications." I outlined the terms of my proposal. Derek would become a subsidiary of Turner and Associates, operating under our business license and ethical guidelines. All client contracts would be reviewed and restructured with realistic expectations. Derek's debt would be consolidated and paid through revenue from properly managed accounts. You'd essentially become an employee of Turner and Associates while maintaining the Hayes marketing name, I explained. But every decision, every client interaction, every financial transaction would be subject to our oversight. Derek nodded eagerly. "That sounds perfect. I accept." "I'm not finished," I said. "The business restructuring is only part of what I require." I turned the laptop screen toward them, displaying a family meeting agenda I'd prepared. "You'll also participate in a complete family discussion about our financial arrangements. No more secrets, no more fake inheritance stories, no more hidden support." Derek's enthusiasm faltered. "You want us to tell Mom and Dad about your business. I want you to tell them the truth about everything. Your business failure, my financial support, the fake inheritance, your debt obligations, and their actual financial situation." Courtney shook her head. "That would devastate them. They'd feel humiliated." "More humiliated than losing their house?" I asked. "More devastated than discovering their retirement savings disappeared into a failed business. More painful than learning their son lied about his financial situation. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline while giving them time to process the ultimatum. When I turned back, both Derek and Courtney looked defeated. The recording of today's meeting will be submitted to ethics authorities unless you agree to complete transparency with our parents, I said. No partial honesty, no cushioned explanations, no attempts to minimize your mistakes or my contributions. Derek struggled with the implications. If we tell them everything, they'll know I failed. Yes, I agreed. They'll also know I succeeded. They'll understand that family support should be based on character rather than assumptions. They'll learn that excluding family members based on image concerns can destroy the relationships you need most. I sat back down and looked directly at both of them. This isn't about humiliating you or proving my superiority. It's about ending the toxic family dynamic that allowed yesterday's group chat message to happen. Courtney wiped tears from her eyes. What happens after we tell them? What happens to our family? That depends, I replied, on whether you're genuinely sorry or just sorry you got caught. It depends on whether you want relationships based on honesty or relationships based on maintaining false images. I picked up the recording device again. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to decide. Either we schedule a family meeting where everything gets discussed openly, or I submit this recording to professional authorities and let the legal system handle Derek's business practices. Derek reached across the table toward me. Charleston, we're family. You wouldn't really destroy my life over this. I set the device down and looked at him seriously. Derek, I've been watching our family dynamic destroy our relationships for years. Yesterday's message wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of months of disrespect and exclusion. I pulled out my phone and showed them the family group chat history. Message after message revealed a pattern of dismissive comments about my life jokes, about my supposed failures, and casual acceptance of my absence from family events. The cruelty had escalated gradually, until Derek felt comfortable sending yesterday's message with full family support. This recording represents my opportunity to demand change. I continued. Either our family learns to value honesty and respect, or Derek faces the consequences of his business decisions without family protection. Courtney looked desperate. There has to be another way, some compromise that doesn't require exposing everything. There isn't, I said firmly. Partial honesty is just sophisticated lying. Either we build family relationships on truth or we don't have genuine relationships at all. Derek stared at the recording device, understanding that his professional survival and family reconciliation both required complete surrender of the image he'd spent years building. What exactly would you want us to say to Mom and Dad? He asked quietly. I smiled for the first time during our meeting. The truth, Derek. Just tell them the truth about everything. 3 days later, I sat in my parents' living room in Springfield, watching Derek pace nervously behind the sofa where Courtney sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Mom and Dad had settled into their usual chairs, confused about why their sons had requested an urgent family meeting. Boys, what's this all about? Dad asked, his weathered hands resting on the arms of his recliner. Derek said it was important, but he wouldn't explain on the phone. Derek took a deep breath and looked at me. I nodded encouragingly, though I could see the fear in his eyes. Everything he'd built his identity around was about to crumble, but it was the only way forward. Mom, Dad, there are some things we need to tell you. Derek began, his voice shaking slightly. About my business, about Charleston, about our family finances. For the next hour, Derek revealed everything. His business was failing, hemorrhaging money at an unsustainable rate. The $30,000 he'd borrowed from them wasn't for expansion. It was a desperate attempt to prevent immediate bankruptcy. His confident presentations about success had been lies designed to protect his image. Mom's face went white when Derek admitted the scope of his financial problems. Dad sat forward in his chair, processing the revelation that his successful son was actually drowning in debt. But Derek wasn't finished. With Courtney holding his hand for support, he explained the fake inheritance that had saved their house, the fictional church raffle that had funded his wedding, and the elaborate system of hidden support that had kept their family financially stable. "Charleston has been supporting all of us for over a year," Derek said, his voice breaking. "While we excluded him from family gatherings and treated him like an embarrassment, he was the one keeping us afloat." Dad turned to look at me, his expression cycling through confusion, amazement, and dawning comprehension. "You own a consulting company in Chicago," I nodded. "Turner and Associates. We handle strategic consulting for mid-sized businesses. I started it 3 years ago after dropping out of college." Mom's eyes filled with tears. The inheritance from Aunt Eleanor's estate. "There was no Aunt Eleanor," I said gently. "I hired an actor to play a lawyer, delivering fictional inheritance money. I've been covering your mortgage payments, Dad's business insurance, and Mom's medications for 18 months. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me as if seeing a stranger processing the reality that their supposedly failed older son had been their financial lifeline while their supposedly successful younger son had been draining their retirement savings. Dad finally spoke. "Charleston, why didn't you tell us?" The question hung in the air, carrying years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. I chose my words carefully, wanting to heal rather than blame. "Because you'd already decided I was a failure," I said. "When I dropped out of college to start my business, you stopped believing in my potential. When Derek succeeded in traditional ways while I chose an unconventional path, the family narrative became that he was the responsible son and I was the disappointment." Mom wiped tears from her cheeks. "We never meant to make you feel that way. But you did," I continued. "Every family gathering became a celebration of Derek's achievements while my life was ignored or dismissed. I stopped attending because watching you struggle financially while being treated as the family embarrassment became unbearable." Derek stepped forward. "Charleston, about yesterday's message about excluding you from Sunday dinners. That message was just the final symptom of a much deeper problem," I interrupted. "Our family stopped seeing me as a person worth respecting. You felt comfortable publicly humiliating me because you'd convinced yourselves I had nothing valuable to contribute." Courtney finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "We were wrong about everything." I looked around the room at my family, seeing genuine remorse in their faces. But remorse alone wasn't enough to rebuild relationships that had been damaged over years. "The question now," I said, "is whether we can build something better together." Dad leaned forward. "What can we do to make this right?" I pulled out a folder I'd prepared containing legal documents and financial plans. "First, we address the immediate crisis. Derek's business will be restructured as a subsidiary of Turner and Associates. His debts will be consolidated and managed through proper cash flow from sustainable operations." Derek nodded gratefully as I outlined the business recovery plan. His company would operate under my oversight with realistic client expectations and ethical practices. Within 2 years, Hayes Marketing Solutions could become genuinely profitable rather than surviving on borrowed time. Second, I continued, we establish honest family finances. No more secret support, no more fictional inheritance stories. I'll set up a family investment fund that provides genuine financial security while preserving everyone's dignity. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, understanding that their financial struggles would be resolved, but their pride would require adjustment. Most importantly, I said, we rebuild our relationships based on respect rather than assumptions. No more dismissing family members based on image concerns. No more excluding people because they chose unconventional paths. Derek stepped closer to my chair. Charleston, can you forgive us? Can we really fix our family? I stood and faced my brother, seeing vulnerability in his eyes. that reminded me of the kid who used to follow me around when we were young. Despite everything that had happened, despite the recorded cruelty and public humiliation, he was still my little brother. "Yes," I said, opening my arms for an embrace. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means building something better from what we've learned." Derek's hug was fierce, filled with relief and genuine remorse. Courtney joined us, tears streaming down her face as she apologized for pushing Derek to exclude me from family gatherings. Mom and Dad stood together watching their sons reconcile after years of artificial distance. When we broke apart, Dad approached me with his hand extended. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have said that years ago. The handshake became another embrace, this one carrying the weight of missed opportunities and renewed connection. Mom joined us, creating the kind of family moment that had been absent from our lives for too long. Over the following weeks, our family dynamics transformed completely. Sunday dinners resumed with genuine celebration of everyone's contributions. Derek's business recovery became a family project, with Mom helping with administrative work and Dad providing practical wisdom about customer relationships. Courtney deleted her social media posts mocking me and instead shared pride about her brother-in-law's genuine achievements. She'd learned painful lessons about the difference between image and substance, between status symbols and real success. 6 months later, Derek's company had become profitable under Turner and Associates' guidance. He'd learned to operate ethically, promise realistically, and build client relationships based on actual value rather than false claims. More importantly, he'd developed the business skills necessary for sustainable success. Our parents' financial stress disappeared entirely. The investment fund I'd created provided security without dependence, allowing them to maintain dignity while knowing they were protected. Dad's construction business rebounded with strategic consulting help, and Mom returned to full-time library work by choice rather than necessity. The recording that could have destroyed Derek's career remained locked in my office safe, a reminder of how close our family had come to permanent fracture. But it also served as evidence of our capacity for growth, change, and forgiveness. As I sit here today reflecting on our journey from exclusion to reconciliation, I'm reminded that family relationships require the same principles as successful businesses: honest communication, mutual respect, and shared commitment to growth. Success means nothing if you don't have people who truly know and value you to share it with. The brother who once called me the family embarrassment now introduces me as his business mentor and closest confidant. The parents who worried about my future now brag to neighbors about their son's consulting company. The sister-in-law who thought I'd embarrass her friends now proudly shares our story as evidence that success comes in many forms. Our family learned that excluding people based on assumptions destroys the very relationships that make achievement meaningful. We discovered that supporting each other through honest challenges creates stronger bonds than celebrating artificial successes. Most importantly, we realized that love requires both forgiveness and accountability, the willingness to change harmful patterns while embracing each other's potential for growth. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced family dynamics where success was measured by image rather than character? How did you handle situations where family members made assumptions about your life without really knowing your story? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else navigate similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more real-life stories about family business and personal growth, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about second chances and family reconciliation. Thanks for listening, and remember that it's never too late to rebuild relationships based on truth, respect, and genuine love.